I have spent countless hours enjoying videos that were made of Christopher Hitchens, using his mind in conversation, interviews, and debates. On many points, I utterly disagreed with his conclusions, but he used facts to come to them, and often, even usually, his facts were correct. But a conclusion requires a starting point from which you reason, and here's where he and I diverge greatly. His roots are from the same tribal history as were those of Karl Marx, and I feel this dislodged Hitchens from the path of truth in many areas. However, having said that, I hold the late Christopher Hitchens in high esteem because, as I see it, he pursued what he thought to be truth, and he didn't care a bit about what anyone else thought. He looked at the world, gathered facts, and considered them, analyzed everything he knew about a topic, and came to conclusions, which he then embraced vigorously. The man was a textbook INTJ. When an interviewer asked him a question, Hitchens looked the guy right in the eye with his own eyes squinted down, gaining sharp focus to ensure that no visible nuance held in the face of the questioner would be missed. His ears were engaged, and his mind was taking in the question, the setting, and putting the phrasing in context so he could spot an attack, or if it were an actual inquiry into what was true, or merely something intended to deflect the conversation from an earlier point that was still bubbling away inside as he listened. When he finally had the question fully in hand, he usually was quick with the response, but it was to the point directly, deep, and well thought out. This was only possible because he clearly spent his quiet alone time absorbing massive amounts of data and processed it to make it fit into his worldview. Quite often what he replied was sharp, cutting right to the bone of common sensibilities and devoid of any hint of political or sociological correctness. The man did care deeply if you misunderstood him, but he was completely indifferent to whether or not you agreed with him. Christopher Hitchens operated in several modes, depending upon whom he was talking to. One idea that bears note, I feel, is his method of overcoming the interrupter, whom I am sure we have all encountered in conversation. As you can see in one of the linked videos below, he used this with friends as well as foes. When someone tried to start talking when Hitchens was at a pause in his delivery of an idea, pursuant to the next part of the thought, he merely kept repeating the next clause of his intended continuation over and over as required until the verbal space was finally relinquished to him so he could continue to the end. He would not be cut off in mid-thought. That was an extremely laudable technique because INTJs do have pauses as we collect our next portion of the thought we are expressing. And if we are not vigilant in holding on to control of the narrative until we reach the end, the other party might very well miss out on the most important part, or indeed the entire thought. In the Horseman video I link below, I saw the INTJ Christopher Hitchens with 3 men who were of a like mind on the topic under discussion. There was the ENTP Daniel Dennett, the INTP Richard Dawkins, and the INFJ Sam Harris. And it suddenly hit me that he shared a number of outward characteristics with my father. That hit me like a hammer. I was completely surprised to see this. I have often speculated that my father was an INTJ, but this is the first time I connected him with a particular INTJ. Hitchens was smoking cigarettes one after another like my dad did. He was drinking something whiskey in color and had the very same look in his eye as I saw in my father's eyes so often. It was creepy. I was shocked for a minute when I realized what was going on. It was that similar. Why I hadn't made that connection before, I don't know. His body posture, the way he sat intently listening, quiet and inside himself, until he was determined to speak, and then saying something that was deep and on point, all reminded me of my father. Maybe it was because most of the time in videos I had seen Hitchens being attacked and happy to counterattack that I missed the similarity before. I usually saw Dad in his quiet, being among friends mode. Hitchens had not fully shed his British mannerisms, but he was far less British sounding than his brother Peter, as you can see in the debate I have linked below between the two of them. As he discussed things with the other 3 men, it is clear to see the difference in approach to ideas, as well as presentation of ideas. I don't know what it is about the INFJ Sam Harris, but he has always rubbed me the wrong way. It isn't that he is saying things that rub me the wrong way so much as the way he says them. It must be the classic inherent personality conflict between 2 types. It has happened in life where I met someone and for no apparent good reason, I just didn't like being around them. With Harris, it is kind of sad because he is generally a likable guy. I looked into it a bit, and I linked below to a site that shows the different motivations for INFJs and INTJs, and that helped me make sense of the problem. An INFJ is interested in harmony over future possibilities, and there are other things where basic motivations are quite different from those of the INTJ. That may be the issue. The other two were very much like men I have befriended in the past. The Santa Claus-like Daniel Dennett spoke kindly and in a friendly manner, but he had thought through every idea before speaking. Richard Dawkins was intent, and as usual, he smiled when he was surprised by something that was said. He had an exchange with Hitchens where he couldn't believe the point that was being stated. And within that point, Hitchens admitted that he hoped their side wouldn't exterminate the other side's position completely because he enjoyed the continuing argument. He compared that situation with one hand clapping. It was an interesting insight into where he was in his own life at that time. Christopher Hitchens acted quite differently under different circumstances. He would aggressively talk over the top of stupidity that was aimed at him like a fire hose in order to shut him up. And if you listen closely to what he was saying as he spoke, there are some well thought out barbs that are directly to the point, and he is loudly slamming them on the table. You would get a pit bull to back down quicker than you would move him away from what he felt was the truth. How refreshingly like an INTJ. Even when I radically disagreed with the point he was making, I loved the way he made it. And in a heated exchange when he got in a really good verbal blow, he would smile, almost mischievously. That INTJ smile is a form of communication, and he used it very well. If stating the fact that some publicly accepted idea is complete rubbish, he would smile in disdain as he paraphrased this bit of intellectual flotsam as though it were not worthy of mention. It is a facial form of ridicule that cuts deep to anyone savvy enough to understand it. His smile indicated that he was stating a point whose validity was obvious to himself, and of course the listener just hadn't thought of it yet. Otherwise, it would be obvious to him as well. His sense of humor was as cutting as his most serious argument against your position. He would laugh, not wildly or uncontrollably, but in a way that would show that not only does an opponent's view or an idea that is being discussed lack validity, it also lacks anything that would grant it any form of dignity. He is saying, this point is so stupid I am forced to laugh at the very idea anyone would take it seriously. But it wasn't a loud, robust emotional release. It was controlled, tight, and inwardly directed, as though, despite the fact that he was laughing at the other party's idea, he was sharing a laugh only with himself. Christopher Hitchens looked intently right into the eye of someone who was making a point or offering a question to him, with a stare that appeared to be boring right through the other party. When it was time to respond, he switched to output mode and accelerated into a fast and orderly expression of his ideas. And if they were being met with hostility, he would look at the ground or possibly the audience, as though his only source of sensation was his own mind. He was not seeking to further his understanding of the other party's point by studying the face. He felt he already understood that. He was only interested in the facts he already had and the conclusions he had stored within his own magnificent mind. He was confident, and some would see that as arrogance, but it was what INTJs tend to express naturally. It is not arrogant to state the truth. It might be rude, but not arrogant. An INTJ will state the truth as he sees it and doesn't ask for second opinions if he is quite sure of his facts. We will and do change our minds. All it takes are facts that have been verified. As Christopher Hitchens moved through his life, he did change his views on many things as more facts came to light. His greatest criticism of President Clinton was very much a characteristic that most INTJs would understand as being deplorable. He named the book No One Left to Lie To. Truth and honesty are prized greatly by INTJs, and to be able to state that someone is primarily a liar is an insult that few others would properly appreciate. It is not calling someone bad, it is calling someone despicable and beneath contempt. This video is not a commentary on the character of Bill Clinton, but rather a discussion of why Hitchens was so disgusted by the idea of lying so easily. An INTJ is constitutionally unable to embrace lies happily. Even though he and I came from such different starting points, on one controversial issue, it appears that we both arrived at a point that is very similar, because we both based our views soundly upon the very same non-theological basis, science, and reason. Using these tools, the unborn child question is resolved in only one possible way. Yet, for Christopher Hitchens, his view was the opposite of those who were politically aligned with him. But an INTJ doesn't set his moral compass or embrace his ideas based upon what others think, even political comrades. Truth wins out. I love that about the man that Christopher Hitchens was. INTJs are not always right, but we are always thinking, and we care about what is right and true, even when we are wrong. I'm not trying to promote Christopher Hitchens' views here. What I am attempting to do is to celebrate the man and his mind and the effort he put into sharing his thoughts with others, freely engaging discussions with people of contrary views, and eager to have his ideas tested in the crucible of debate and confrontation. I disagree with the views he expressed often, but even then I was inspired by his spirit, his tenacity, and his ability to express an idea clearly, openly, and freely, even, or should I say especially, when he knew beforehand that what he was saying would be unpopular and met with open hostility. I think he viewed himself as a warrior for truth, and he tried his best to remain true to his conclusions about life, philosophy, and religious and political figures. His wit, his cutting sarcasm, and his deep contemplation of great ideas are all things that INTJs are at home with. Even when two INTJs disagree, we accept that there is a truth to be had, even if one or both of us don't see it yet, and we are searching to find it, no matter what side of a question we are currently on. Christopher Hitchens met death as he met life, looking it straight in the eye. Whether I am in agreement or disagreement on the various points that Christopher Hitchens spoke on or wrote about does not matter, because I admire the man, the INTJ, who pursued what he thought was truth right up to his dying day. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.